someone else, it may just be more difficult to kind of see that and notice that and be there for them during that time, because you might be so caught up in all of the amazing emotions that you're going through.
Yeah, and so that's interesting, like that feeling of being able to do anything, it can also like really be a detriment. 'Cause I think it can get you to really overcommit. It can get you to, I think it can get you to feel like, oh, this is never going to end. These feelings are never going to end. Yeah. And to be fair, I think we've definitely been kind of sold that bill of goods by a lot of our media of like, once you actually find the right person, the NRE is never going to end. Mm-hmm. You know, you're going to feel that way all the time, to a certain extent. And I think also like, because like if you meet someone and you have this like really intense reaction, it can definitely lead you to feel like, oh, it's always going to feel this way. And so like, I really need to prioritize my time with this person, or I need to move my life around for this person. And so it can definitely cloud your judgment and lead you to make not as well thought out decisions in the long run. I know I've definitely made so many bad decisions.
Oh, really?
Under the oh gosh, Emily, I can't even. So many bad decisions under the influence of NRE. And then along those same lines, it's funny because I feel like actually Shakespeare was pretty good at pointing out the bad sides of falling in love or NRE as well.
Ironically though, no one looks at that part of the story.
Exactly. No one looks at that part of the stories, or the sonnets also. Like, you know, I used to have a book of Shakespeare's sonnets, and I would like try to flip through to a random one, and like it feels like the majority of them are actually pretty negative.
Interesting.
You know, there are some like the really famous ones that we know that are really romantic, but a lot of them are just lamenting like, this sucks actually. like I feel like I've lost my judgment, and you know, I feel like both being separated from you and being with you somehow feels terrible at the same time, and I don't understand why, and why do people do this? This is such a folly. That there is a lot of that, and I think that is actually like a fundamental part that we often don't talk about, is the fact that like you can feel depressed when that person isn't around, or you can feel really obsessive about what they are or are not doing, or like really obsessive about, they said this, but what does that mean? Then they did this, but what does that mean? And then should I say this or should I say that? That like everything just really gets turned up, sometimes in this really negative way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also for non-monogamy, there are ways that NRE can be difficult to manage in your existing relationships. Mm-hmm. So one of these is this experience where, because you're an NRE and you have that kind of obsessive brain chemistry going on, that it's like all of your energy and all of your time and everything is being directed at this new person who's activating these kind of addiction sorts of feelings, which can actually crowd out some of either your energy or your time that you have with your existing partners. So that can definitely cause some trouble in that relationship.
Yeah, and it can also cause kind of like an intrusion on the outside relationship. So it may just be like in the form of a little interruption, like, unwanted phone calls or texts, when you're in the middle of a date, perhaps, or even just like sitting around watching TV with your partner, and all of a sudden you get a phone call or a text from your new partner that you're going through NRE with. That can kind of be intrusive on your current relationships. Or just even like spending so much time with this new person, that can intrude and kind of infringe upon the existing relationship as well.
Yeah. So you guys want to talk about some science?
Yeah, hit us with science.
All right.
Although it's with old hell and
old hell.
Old hell.
That's what we call her here.
Yeah.
Right. So, Helen Fisher, which many people probably know from her various TED Talks and things like that she's done. She's definitely the best known researcher today who's doing research on love and the brain chemicals and things that go on. We, as well as many other people like Dan Savage or Carrie Jenkins or, Chris Ryan, like a lot of us have some issues with some of the assumptions that she makes about the way people work, being very heteronormative and very like the only purpose of falling in love is in order to pair bond monogamously and to have children, and kind of totally discounting same-sex
Anything
couples
else?
or asexual people or, anything else that doesn't fit that mold. But the science she does is interesting. It's just the conclusions that she makes from it that are based on her assumptions that are problematic. So in this study, that's the one that she talks about a lot, is a study done with, a fairly large sampling of college students mostly who reported recently having fallen deeply in love. And that...
What does that mean? Like, really?
It's self-reporting,
College
right?
students in love.
Yeah. Whatever they think that means. But in the
Exactly.
studies, they did find some interesting things by doing like fMRIs and, like hormone tests and things like that. And they found elevated activity in, I'm going to try to pronounce these, the caudate nucleus and the ventral tegmental area, which the important takeaway there is that those are both areas in the brain that are associated with the reward system. The reward system being things involved in like addiction or in seeking out food or sex or like kind of these base desires.
Right. So the reward system is connected to having, like dopamine injected into your system by your brain, essentially. So the idea that like if you're hungry, you go find food, you eat the food, you feel a little rush of dopamine afterwards. Like that's the pleasure you feel during and after eating. And that like encourages you to keep doing that, to keep nourishing your body.
To keep living.
Keep living. And same thing with sex. We have like a dopamine release during and after orgasm. And so the thing is that like when you're falling in love with someone, when you're in NRE, you definitely have this surge in dopamine, and that's the reason why it can end up feeling obsessive, because it does become like an addiction. The same way that addictive substances usually cause a huge rush of dopamine, that's kind of what you chase, is that like you're chasing this high and this energy that you get from this new person that you're involved with. There's also some evidence in her research of cortisol, of the stress hormone being involved. She doesn't really emphasize it, but I think anecdotally, like definitely makes sense that it also is kind of like we talked about how there's can also be this dark underside of NRE that is really stressful and actually kind of unsettling as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there was a different study done, Donatella Marazzi. I'm not saying that right.
Marazzi. Yeah, come on, use your Pimsleur Italian on us.
I know, I did. Donatella Marazzi.
Great.
That's as good as I got. Okay. Of the University of Pisa in Italy, showed that in 2004 that compared to single people or people in stable long-term relationships, newly in love people, so people probably in NRE,
right.
They showed lower than normal levels of serotonin and also significantly higher levels of cortisol. So that's kind of similar to clinical OCD, which is interesting that was said.
The lower
makes
levels
total
of
sense.
serotonin.
Yeah,
serotonin
because serotonin is what kicks in to make you feel satisfied.
Sure.
Right.
It's that like that's kind of like
damn it, sorry.
Singing from Hamilton
to
again.
bring it back to kind of like when I listen to Hamilton, it gets stuck in my head and there's no serotonin release because I'm not done listening to it. And I want to keep listening to it obsessively.
You never will be satisfied.
I'll never be satisfied. Anyway, to bring it back to a more reasonable example, like with the food thing, that like you seek out food because you're hungry, you eat the food, you get the dopamine release, and then afterwards you also get serotonin that helps you know that you are satisfied and you are sated. And then in addiction, that serotonin release doesn't happen. That's why you need more and more and more and more, is because there isn't that feeling of being satisfied. And I guess that makes sense with the clinical OCD thing, the idea that doing an action doesn't satisfy that feeling, and you feel like you need to do the action over and over and over and over again because it doesn't actually get satisfied.
Well, serotonin, is also related to just kind of a feeling of well-being in general. Which is why, like, a lot of the medications for depression, or even anxiety are affecting serotonin, either by synthesizing it or by stopping your body from reabsorbing it so that more of it stays in your system and is more freely accessible. So it's a pretty big deal hormone, and it's not just with all of these, they're not just like a more is better or a less is better kind of thing. It's finding a balance, right? So I thought this was really interesting, that study there that they had previously, years before the Helen Fisher study, had seen this thing with cortisol being higher, meaning like that we're more stressed. I thought that was really interesting. And then also to go along with kind of the making bad decisions thing, there was, Andreas Bartels of the University College in London did a study that showed with in newly in love people, and they also